Picture this. The most powerful room in America. Cameras rolling. Two presidents under the same roof. And in just 60 seconds, everything you think you know about political power is about to be flipped upside down. What you're about to hear will change how you see leadership forever. Because on this night, when Trump lost his temper and screamed, "Get out!" at Barack Obama, what happened next wasn't just a comeback. It was a masterclass in dignity that left an entire room speechless and a nation stunned. I'm going to tell you about the moment Obama didn't just defend himself. He delivered a line so devastating, so perfectly timed, that it flipped the entire room against Trump. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why this 60-second exchange is being called the most powerful political moment of our lifetime. But here's what makes this incredible. This wasn't planned. This wasn't scripted. This was two men, two legacies, colliding in real time with millions watching. And what unfolded was so explosive that even Trump's own supporters couldn't defend what they saw. Stay with me, because this story has everything. Raw emotion, shocking confrontations, a crowd turning against a sitting president, and a comeback so brilliant it's already being quoted in classrooms across America. By the time we're done, you'll know exactly why Obama's response that night will be remembered for decades. The room was dressed for history, but nobody expected to witness this much of it. The East Room of the White House glittered under crystal chandeliers. Every seat was taken. Senators, governors, ambassadors, journalists, all pressing close. Cameras lining the walls like watchful eyes. This wasn't just another political dinner. This was supposed to be unity night, a bipartisan effort to show America that its leaders could still come together. Can you imagine the irony? Someone actually thought putting Trump and Obama in the same room and calling it Unity Night was a good idea. A White House aide was overheard muttering that it was like inviting fire and water to dinner and hoping for a handshake. But here's what nobody knew. The tension was already thick enough to cut with a knife. You could see it in how people leaned forward, whispering in low tones before quickly going quiet. At the head table, Trump sat rigid, flanked by aides who looked like they were expecting an explosion. And they were right to be nervous. Former President Barack Obama, dressed in a dark suit with that familiar composed expression, was scheduled to speak after dinner. The cameras never left either man. Everyone in that room knew that when Trump and Obama shared the same stage, sparks were guaranteed. But nobody, and I mean nobody, expected what was about to happen. The evening started calm. Light conversation about policy, sports, international partnerships. Cameras caught moments of polite laughter, clinking glasses, smiles that looked rehearsed. But underneath, people were restless. Reporters typed constantly, glancing back and forth between the two presidents, waiting for the moment one of them would make news. That moment came faster than anyone imagined. When Obama finally stood up to speak, you could feel the atmosphere shift. Some guests clapped warmly. Others hesitated, their eyes darting toward Trump like they were checking the temperature. The former president began in his trademark rhythm, measured, deliberate, carrying weight without force. He talked about American institutions, about putting country before party, about leaders needing to temper personal pride for national stability. His voice echoed through the East Room, steady and confident, but everyone felt the same thing. This wasn't just a speech. He was making a point, and everyone knew exactly who that point was aimed at. History will not measure us by how loudly we speak, Obama said, glancing around the room, but by whether we listened, by whether we chose courage over chaos, unity over division. A few heads nodded. A few others tightened their lips, clearly uneasy. Trump shifted in his chair, fingers drumming on the table, eyes narrowing. His aides exchanged worried looks. They could see the storm building. Obama continued, his words calm but undeniably sharp. This nation is bigger than one man's pride. It is stronger than any one personality, and it will endure so long as we remember that truth. The air grew heavier. Even seasoned politicians leaned forward, unsure how Trump would react. The cameras zoomed in, sensing something massive was about to happen. And then, like a dam bursting, it did. Trump shot up from his chair. The screech of metal against marble sliced through the quiet like a blade. He pointed directly at Obama, his voice rising above the stunned silence. Get out. Those two words slammed into the room like thunder. Gasps erupted everywhere. Journalists jolted upright, scrambling to capture every second. Senators froze mid-bite. A European diplomat raised his eyebrows and whispered to his neighbor, "Did he really just say that?" But here's what made it even more shocking. Obama didn't move. Not an inch. He didn't flinch, didn't break eye contact, didn't show even a flicker of surprise. His silence stretched over the chaos, commanding the room without saying a word. For a moment that felt like eternity. Time itself seemed frozen. Trump's aides rushed toward him, whispering frantically. Staff members tried to calm the shock rippling through the crowd, but it was too late. The words had been said, and every camera in the room had captured it all. The East Room, a place that had hosted decades of presidential history, now carried tension you could cut with a knife. What had started as Unity Night had just turned into the most explosive political theater anyone had ever witnessed. But the real story? The real story hadn't even started yet. Because what Obama said next would turn that tense silence into one of the most unforgettable moments in modern American politics. Think about it. A sitting president just shouted "Get out" at a former president on live television, in the White House, in front of the world. That alone would have been front-page news for weeks. But what happened next was so much bigger than anyone could have predicted. The room buzzed with disbelief. Reporters whispered frantically. Aides shuffled nervously. Several guests stared at their plates, avoiding eye contact altogether. It wasn't just the shock of hearing a president yell. It was the rawness of it, the kind of unfiltered emotion you could never script, never rehearse, the kind that burns itself instantly into memory of everyone who witnesses it. But Obama didn't move. His hands rested lightly on the podium, his posture relaxed, his face perfectly calm. For a man who had faced hecklers, critics, and international crises, this was just another moment, only magnified by the weight of where it was happening and who it was directed at. Instead of raising his voice, Obama leaned closer to the microphone. His tone was steady, measured, almost gentle. "Mr. President," he began, his eyes never leaving Trump, "with all due respect, this room doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the American people." The silence that followed was crushing. Every ear in the room strained to hear his next words. A cameraman in the back actually lowered his equipment for a split second, stunned by the precision of that reply. Obama continued, his voice cutting through the tension like glass. "I was invited here, just as you were, to speak on unity. And if unity makes you this uncomfortable, maybe it says more about where we are as a country than anything I could ever say tonight." That line hit like lightning. Murmurs erupted at tables across the room. A senator from Arizona shook her head slowly, mouthing the word, "Wow." College students who had been invited to witness history whispered excitedly, phones already recording. Trump bristled, his lips pressing to a hard line. He gestured to his aides, clearly signaling for them to cut the microphone, but the staff hesitated. No one wanted to be responsible for silencing a former president on live television. The optics would have been catastrophic. Obama glanced briefly at the crowd, then returned his focus to Trump. "You can ask me to leave," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But you can't erase what needs to be heard." And that's when the East Room erupted. Not polite applause. Real, thunderous clapping. Some guests even stood in their seats. The sound echoed so loudly it almost drowned out the chaos of aides frantically pacing near the walls. Obama raised a hand slightly, asking for calm, but his composure only magnified the weight of his words. "This isn't about me, and it isn't about you," he said, his tone softening but never losing its edge. "It's about every American family watching tonight. Families who are tired of leaders treating politics like a grudge match. Families who don't care about insults and power plays. They care about whether their kids can grow up safe, whether their parents can afford health care, whether their voices mean something." The applause built again, stronger this time. Guests who hadn't dared clap earlier now joined in, emboldened by the moment. Even some who disagreed with Obama politically couldn't deny the force of what they were witnessing. Trump tried to cut in, clearly furious. "You're here to embarrass me. That's all this is." Obama didn't blink. I'm here to remind you that the presidency is bigger than one man's pride, bigger than my pride, bigger than yours. And the minute we forget that, we all lose. Can you imagine being in that room, feeling the electricity in the air as these words landed, one after another, steady as a drumbeat? Even Trump's own aides looked torn, unsure whether to intervene or let this confrontation play out. But Obama wasn't done. He adjusted the microphone slightly and delivered a line that would echo through American politics for years to come. "You can shout all you want," he said quietly, his voice carrying across the silence. "But leadership isn't measured by volume. It's measured by character." The applause was deafening. People stood again, clapping harder, but the sound was impossible to ignore. Trump's face reddened, his jaw tight. He tried to speak again, but the applause drowned him out. Obama waited until the sound faded, then closed with words that will be quoted in classrooms and boardrooms for decades. My message tonight is simple. We don't heal this country by tearing each other down. We heal it by remembering that we all serve something greater than ourselves. But as powerful as that moment was, it was only the beginning, because Trump's next outburst would push this confrontation into territory nobody could have predicted. The applause had barely died down when Trump lunged forward, gripping the edge of his table like he was steadying himself for a fight. His face was flushed, eyes darting between the cameras and Obama. For someone who lived on spectacle and control, being overshadowed in his own White House was absolutely intolerable. "You think you're some kind of saint, don't you?" Trump bellowed, his voice cracking through the East Room like thunder. "You come in here, into MY House, and act like you've got the answers to everything. Let me tell you something. I'm the president. Not you. Not anymore. Me." The words bounced off the walls, colliding with the stunned silence of 400 guests. Gasps rippled through the tables. A woman from the State Department pressed her hands over her mouth. Journalists scribbled notes so fast their pens nearly tore the paper. Obama didn't respond immediately. He simply watched, calm as stone, letting the outburst settle. His stillness contrasted so sharply with Trump's raw anger that it only heightened the drama unfolding on live television. Trump jabbed a finger toward him. "You had your time. 8 years. And what did we get? A mess. Now you waltz back in here like you're some kind of savior. Get out. I said get out." He repeated the phrase louder, practically shouting over his own echo. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Senators from both parties fidgeted in their seats. A guest from Dallas muttered under his breath, "This is madness." Cameras zoomed in tight, capturing Trump's hands trembling as he gestured furiously, capturing Obama's unshakable calm, capturing a collision of two legacies happening in real time. Obama finally spoke, his tone quiet and deliberate. "Mr. President, the White House doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the American people, and they deserve better than this display." That only enraged Trump further. He turned to the audience, throwing his arms wide. "See this? See what he's doing? He's trying to humiliate me on national television. It's disgraceful." From the corner, a senator halfway stood, then sat back down, unsure whether to intervene. No one wanted to be the first to step into this collision of egos playing out in front of the world. Trump slammed his hand on the table. "Security! Security, where are you? I want him out of here." But here's what was remarkable. The Secret Service agents positioned near the doors didn't move. They exchanged careful glances, then stayed put. Removing a former president on live television wasn't just risky, it was unthinkable. The optics would have destroyed the administration. You could feel it in the room. Trump had lost control, not just of the moment, but of the very image he so carefully tried to command. His authority, once absolute within those walls, was cracking in front of millions. Obama leaned into the microphone. "I'm not here to humiliate anyone. I'm here because the people who invited me believe this country deserves a conversation about unity, about dignity, about leadership. If that makes you uncomfortable, then maybe the question isn't about me being here. Maybe it's about why you feel so threatened by the idea of unity." The line cut sharp and clean. A collective gasp swept through the room, followed by applause that grew louder and louder until it drowned out Trump's protests. "Sit down," Trump roared, but his voice cracked against the tide of clapping hands. Obama straightened, waiting calmly for the room to quiet again. His face betrayed nothing but composure, while Trump fumed, pacing slightly behind his table, muttering to aides who had no idea what to do. The cameras captured everything. The President of the United States, red-faced and furious, and the former president, steady and unshaken, delivering words that carried the weight of reason. "Respect isn't demanded," Obama said, his tone like steel wrapped in velvet. "It's earned. And right now, the American people are watching to see who among us understands that truth." The applause came again, this time stronger, as if the audience itself had chosen a side in real time. Trump shouted over it, "This is my presidency, my event. I won't be lectured by you in front of the world." Obama tilted his head slightly, not in mockery, but in something closer to pity. "Your presidency, Mr. President, belongs to the people, not to you. That's the first thing every leader should understand." The audience stirred again, whispers weaving through the rows of chairs. Even those who had come expecting a stiff ceremonial dinner now realized they were part of a moment that would be replayed for decades. The clash wasn't just about two men. It was about two visions of leadership colliding under the same roof, one fueled by anger and spectacle, the other by calm defiance and words that seemed designed to echo long after microphones were turned off. Trump slammed the table once more. "I said get out." But this time, the demand didn't land with force. It sounded hollow, almost desperate, swallowed by the silence that followed. And then, almost on cue, a voice from the crowd broke the tension. It came from a governor seated near the back. "Let him speak." It was soft at first, but then others picked it up. "Let him speak," a senator murmured. "Let him speak," another echoed. Soon, half the room was chanting it, their voices weaving together until it became impossible to ignore. Trump froze, eyes darting around, stunned that his own event had slipped from his grip. Obama stood silently, waiting. But what came next would transform the confrontation into something no one in that room or watching at home would ever forget. The chant, let him speak," rippled through the East Room like a wave. At first it was scattered, timid, just a handful of voices testing the boundaries. But then it swelled, gathering strength until the entire chamber seemed to be pulsing with it. Senators, governors, journalists, students, diplomats. Voices rising together in unison, drowning out Trump's attempts to shout over them. Trump slammed his palm against the table again, red-faced, barking, "This is my house, mine." But his words were buried beneath the noise. His own event had turned against him. The cameras caught every angle. Trump's fury, the crowd's defiance, Obama's composure. Obama remained at the podium, waiting patiently. He didn't gesture. He didn't shout for silence. He simply stood steady as a mountain, letting the room find its voice. The image was stark. One man losing control, while another gained it without even trying. When the chant finally died down, the silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't just silence. It was expectation. Every set of eyes in the room was locked on Obama, waiting for what he would say next. Obama leaned closer to the microphone, his voice calm and unhurried, carried across the room. "We are standing in the people's house. Not one man's stage, not one party's theater. This is the people's house, and the people," he paused, scanning the crowd, "deserve to be heard." The audience erupted again, clapping and cheering, but this time it wasn't wild or chaotic. It was steady, unified, deliberate. The applause rolled like thunder, echoing to the chandeliers, spilling into the hallways beyond. Trump waved his arms, his voice breaking. "Fake news. They'll spin this. They'll make it look like I lost control." From the back of the room, a journalist from the Des Moines Register shouted, "Mr. President, they don't have to spin anything. The cameras are live." The crowd laughed, not cruelly, but sharply, the way people laugh when someone points out the obvious truth. Trump's face flushed deeper, the laughter slicing at him more painfully than any insult. Obama took advantage of the pause. "No one came here tonight to watch two men shout each other down. They came here because they believe this country is capable of more. They believe we can sit at the same table even when we disagree and find a way forward." He gestured lightly toward Trump's table. I'll say this again. Leadership is not about volume. It's about vision. You can command a room with anger, or you can guide it with dignity. The choice is yours. But one choice lasts longer than the other. The words landed heavy, resonating not just in the East Room, but with the millions watching at home. Social media platforms were already ablaze. Hashtags trending, memes forming, live streams dissecting each sentence in real time. On Twitter, one user typed, "Obama just turned Trump's house into his classroom." Trump clenched his fists, pacing behind his chair. "This is a setup." "A total setup," he barked, pointing toward the journalists. "You're all against me, all of you." But the crowd wasn't on his side anymore. Guests who would normally avoid any public display of disloyalty were now openly shaking their heads. Some looked down at their plates, embarrassed. Others exchanged knowing glances, the kind that said silently, "This is history, and we're watching it unfold right here." A senator from Wisconsin leaned toward his colleague and whispered loud enough for a nearby microphone to catch it. "I've never seen anything like this. He's unraveling." Obama didn't strike back. He didn't mock. He simply waited until the noise settled, then spoke again, his voice steady as ever. "Anger is easy. Blame is easy. But when the anger fades, when the shouting ends, what will you have left? What will history remember? That you shouted the loudest, or that you chose to rise above it?" For a moment, no one spoke. Even Trump fell into a strained silence, as though the weight of those words had lodged somewhere he couldn't shake. The cameras zoomed in close. Obama at the podium, his expression composed, his words carrying like a steady drumbeat. Trump, in contrast, sat stiff, lips pressed together, face flushed, the picture of a man cornered not by force, but by his own loss of control. The energy in the room shifted again. People leaned in, captivated. Even those who had walked in skeptical of Obama found themselves drawn in. It wasn't about politics anymore. It was about two men, one wielding anger, the other wielding patience, and which one the country would remember. Then from the press section, a reporter called out, "Mr. Obama, what do you say to those who believe unity is impossible under this administration?" Obama didn't hesitate. Unity is never impossible. It's only difficult. And difficult things are always worth fighting for. The room applauded again. Aides on both sides scrambled nervously, unsure how to handle the momentum of the night. Trump muttered angrily under his breath, but his voice was drowned in the applause. The confrontation was no longer just a clash of egos. It was becoming a defining moment, one that would ripple far beyond the walls of the White House. But the world outside was already reacting in real time. And the frenzy brewing beyond those walls was about to explode in ways no one inside could fully imagine. The East Room had shifted into something resembling a courtroom. Every eye weighed the two men. Every breath felt suspended between Trump's bursts of rage and Obama's measured calm. The contrast was impossible to miss. Where Trump fumed, Obama seemed carved from stone. Steady, deliberate, unshaken. For a moment, Obama let the silence breathe. He didn't rush to fill it. He knew silence could be louder than words if held long enough. Slowly, he glanced around the room, making eye contact with senators, governors, students, and staffers as if reminding them, this isn't about two men. It's about all of you. Finally, he spoke. "The presidency is not a crown," Obama said, his voice low, but cutting through the room like a blade. "It's a responsibility. And sometimes responsibility means hearing things you don't want to hear." Murmurs spread. Some guests nodded. Others sat frozen, unwilling to risk being caught clapping on camera. But the energy had tilted. The room now seemed to lean toward Obama. Trump slammed his fist on the table again. "You're not the president anymore, Barack. Nobody voted for you this time. Nobody wants to hear you preach." Obama didn't flinch. "And yet here I am," he replied evenly. "Because Americans still believe in decency, still believe in dialogue, still believe in dignity." The crowd stirred again, a senator whispering, "That's going to be quoted forever." Trump's face darkened. "Don't lecture me about dignity. I built this country back up. You left it weak. You left it broken. Everyone knows it." Obama shook his head lightly, almost as if he pitied the desperation. Mr. President, strength isn't measured by how loudly you pound the table. It's measured by whether you lift people up or tear them down. And right now, the country is watching a president who confuses intimidation with leadership. That landed hard. The crowd gasped. Even a few Republican senators exchanged uneasy looks. Trump turned toward the audience, seeking support. You see? He's disrespecting the office, disrespecting me. From somewhere in the crowd, a voice shouted back, "Respect has to be earned." The room erupted with murmurs. Obama let the moment breathe again, then stepped closer to the microphone. His voice was calm, deliberate, but there was steel beneath it. I spent 8 years in this office. I know how heavy the burden can be. I know the sleepless nights, the crises, the loneliness of leadership. But I also know this. You cannot lead a nation if you are ruled by your temper. You cannot unite a country if every criticism feels like an attack. Leadership requires patience. It requires humility. The East Room was dead quiet now. You could hear the whirring of cameras, the scratching of pens across paper. Trump muttered angrily into the mic, "You think you're so perfect? You think you never made mistakes?" Obama shook his head. "I made plenty, but the measure of a leader isn't whether he makes mistakes. It's whether he learns from them. And the measure of a nation isn't whether it has disagreements. It's whether it can rise above them." The words hung heavy in the air. People weren't just hearing a speech anymore. They were witnessing a moral lesson, one unfolding in real time. Trump stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. "This is over," he shouted, gesturing for aides to clear the podium. "I won't let him humiliate me in my own house." But again, the Secret Service didn't move. They stood watchful, but motionless. Removing a former president who had been invited would have been political suicide. Obama leaned into the mic one last time. "With all due respect, Mr. President, the people watching tonight aren't judging me. They're judging you. And the question they'll ask themselves tomorrow isn't, 'What did Obama say?' It will be, 'How did Trump react?'" The crowd gasped again. Trump froze, his face twitching with fury, but he didn't respond. For the first time all night, his silence was louder than his words. Reporters typed furiously. Hashtags lit up across social media. Every outlet knew instantly that the soundbite would dominate headlines. "The people aren't judging me, they're judging you." Obama took a sip of water, calm, collected, almost casual, as though nothing about the confrontation had rattled him. He set the glass down gently, then added, "The presidency is temporary. Character is permanent." Applause exploded. People rose to their feet. Not everyone clapped. Some folded their arms, unwilling to betray loyalty. But the sound was overwhelming. Trump's fists clenched. His eyes darted around the room, searching for some foothold of control. But it was gone. Obama had seized the room, not with force, not with anger, but with a quiet authority that spoke louder than any shout. The East Room was no longer Trump's stage. It was Obama's classroom, and America was listening. But outside those walls, beyond the chandeliers and the polished marble floors, the country itself was reacting in real time. And the media storm was about to make this clash even bigger than anyone inside could have imagined. The East Room was vibrating with tension. The chandeliers glittered above. The cameras hummed steadily. And every person in the crowd could sense that something irreversible had just happened. But then came the moment that would echo across televisions, phones, and radio for days. Obama straightened, leaned just slightly toward the microphone, and delivered the line that would leave America speechless. "Mr. President," he said with calm precision, his voice so measured it felt almost surgical. "You can tell me to leave, but the truth is, history will remember who told the truth and who tried to silence it." The words landed like a strike to the heart of the evening. For a full beat, there was no sound at all. Not a cough, not a shuffle of papers, not even a word of a camera motor. The entire room held its breath, processing the quiet devastation of that sentence. Trump's jaw clenched, his body stiff with anger, but he didn't reply. For once, he had no immediate comeback. That silence, his silence, was louder than any of his shouting, and that was when the room erupted. Applause roared like thunder. Guests surged to their feet. Some pounded the tables. Others shouted encouragement. The noise was so loud that the sound system seemed to distort. Obama didn't raise his hand to quiet it this time. He let it wash over the room, a tidal wave of approval, crashing against the walls of the White House itself. At the far side of the hall, a group of university students were standing, fists in the air, recording on their phones, as if documenting the single most important moment of their lives. A senator leaned to his colleague and whispered, "That line will be quoted for 50 years. Trump tried to cut in, waving his arms. "Fake, all fake," he barked, pointing at the journalists. "They'll spin this against me. They always do." But the crowd was no longer with him. The applause had already stamped the moment into history. Obama hadn't just defended himself. He had turned the confrontation into a symbolic clash between dignity and rage, between reason and reaction. Obama finally spoke again, his voice cutting gently through the applause. This country deserves better than shouting matches. It deserves leaders who can disagree without trying to erase each other. Because the truth is, America isn't about one man or one party or one election. It's about the people, and the people are watching. That line struck, too. People in the room glanced toward the cameras, suddenly aware that millions of families at home were indeed watching. In kitchens, in living rooms, on phones, at diners and airports, every word was being heard, every moment replayed instantly on social media. Aides clustered nervously at the side of the room, unsure whether to intervene. The Secret Service still stood motionless, their faces unreadable, their eyes scanning but never shifting. Trump barked orders at them again, but they remained statues, unwilling to touch the powder keg before them. The applause didn't die down quickly. It rose and fell in waves, as if the crowd itself couldn't get enough of what they had just witnessed. A governor from Oregon later told reporters, "You could feel the ground shift in that room. Everyone knew right then. We were watching history." Trump finally slammed his fist against the table once more. "This is a disgrace. Total disgrace," he shouted, his voice cracking. But it didn't matter anymore. His anger had been eclipsed. Obama lowered his gaze briefly, then looked straight into the cameras. "To the American people watching at home," he said softly, "don't let anger be louder than hope. Don't let fear shout down your voice. And never let anyone convince you that decency is weakness. Decency is strength." That was it. That was the moment. The line that reporters would plaster across headlines, that anchors would recite on primetime television, that late-night shows would replay over and over. The crowd leapt to its feet again, the sound of clapping echoing like cannon fire. For the first time in the evening, it didn't feel like a dinner or a speech. It felt like a reckoning. Even some would come in skeptical. Republican senators, White House staffers, sat quietly shaken, not convinced politically perhaps, but unable to deny the force of what they had just seen. Obama stepped back from the podium slightly, folding his hands in front of him. He didn't gloat, didn't smile, didn't appear triumphant. He simply stood there, the very picture composure, as if to say, "The words speak for themselves. I don't need to add anything more." And in that moment, the contrast was complete. Trump's fury burned hot, but brief. Obama's words, cool and steady, were already etching themselves into memory. Guests began whispering to each other almost reverently. One journalist scribbled in the margins of his notes. This wasn't a speech. This was a verdict. Trump muttered again, incoherent, pointing at the press pool, but no one seemed to care anymore. The cameras had their story. The people at home had their moment. Obama stepped back to the podium for one final line in that exchange. "I'll leave when I'm finished speaking," he said, calm as ever. "And when history looks back, it won't ask who shouted. It'll ask who stood with dignity." The applause was deafening. But what was happening beyond those walls, in newsrooms, in diners, on phones and televisions across the country, would soon make this clash larger than either man, sparking a media storm unlike anything Washington had seen in years. By the time Obama left the podium, the confrontation had already escaped the White House walls. Reporters were typing furiously. Live feeds were streaming on half a dozen networks, and phones across the country buzzed with breaking news alerts. CNN's cheering read, "Trump shouts at Obama, 'Get out Obama's reply stuns room. Fox News broke in with their panel. Some commentators defending Trump's right to control his stage. Others unable to ignore the power of Obama's comeback. MSNBC simply replayed the moment again and again, each time the clip of Obama's calm response hitting harder than the last. Social media was even faster. On Twitter, hashtags trended within minutes. Obama reply, get out moment, decency is strength. A clip posted by a student from the back of the East Room had already been viewed 5 million times by the time the official networks caught up. TikTok exploded with edits of Obama's words, some layered over dramatic music. Others cut into memes contrasting Trump's shouts with Obama's composure. In Los Angeles, a group of college students watching the stream in their dorm erupted into cheers. In a small diner outside Phoenix, truck drivers leaned over their coffee cups, shaking their heads at Trump's loss of control. In Boston, a family who had voted differently for years watched silently together, each one feeling the sting of exchange in their own way. Newsrooms scrambled. Anchors asked experts, what does this mean for presidency, for Obama's legacy, for Trump's? One historian compared it to Nixon's confrontations during Watergate, calling it the kind of exchange that defines how future generations remember both men. Another analyst said bluntly, Obama didn't just win that room. He won the narrative. Trump's allies tried to spin quickly. On Fox, a congressman argued, the former president hijacked an event meant to honor bipartisanship. On Twitter, loyal surrogates typed furiously, Obama disrespected the office by lecturing the president in his own house. But those takes were drowned out by the viral storm. For every defense, there were 10 reposts of Obama's line. History will remember who told the truth and who tried to silence it. That one sentence was everywhere. On T-shirts, on graphics, on church billboards in small towns. By midnight, someone had painted it in bold letters on a mural in Philadelphia, the city where the Constitution was signed. Inside the White House, aides scrambled to contain the fallout. One senior staffer reportedly muttered to another, we've lost the night. This clip will play until next week. Trump himself paced the residence afterward, furious, calling confidants and ranting about betrayal. According to one aide, he repeated the words fake, rigged, staged dozens of times. But even in private, there was no clear path to undo what millions had already seen with their own eyes. Obama, by contrast, didn't stay long. He left the East Room with a simple wave, shaking hands with a few guests before stepping into the night. Outside, reporters swarmed, shouting questions, but he only gave a short remark. I said what I needed to say, he told them. Now it's up to the American people. That soundbite became almost as powerful as his original reply. Calm, understated, but filled with finality. By midnight, late-night comedians were already preparing their opening monologues. On The Daily Show, clips of Trump yelling, "Get out," were spliced next to clips of Obama calmly sipping water. On Saturday Night Live, writers scrambled to build a cold open around the confrontation. Even Jimmy Fallon previewed it in his opening, joking, it's the first time in history a room full of politicians actually wanted a speech to keep going. But for ordinary Americans, the moment felt less like comedy and more like a window into something raw and true. People debated it in bars, in grocery store aisles, on buses. The country had been given a rare moment where the mask slipped, where the power dynamics were laid bare for everyone to see. And for many, it wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about character. A school teacher in Kansas told a local reporter, I tell my kids every day, how you handle anger says more about you than what you say in anger. Tonight, Obama showed patience. Trump showed the opposite. A retired factory worker in Ohio said, I voted Republican my whole life, but I'll tell you this. Obama looked like a leader tonight. Trump looked like a man out of control. The ripple spread further across cable shows, across talk radio, across Facebook comment threads. Clips were replayed in airports, in gyms, in hotel lobbies. The confrontation wasn't just news. It was already becoming folklore. By dawn the next day, newspapers across the country carried front-page headlines. The Washington Post, Obama's words shake White House. The Boston Globe, Decency versus anger, a night America won't forget. Even international outlets weighed in. The BBC called it an extraordinary moment in modern American politics. Le Monde in Paris described Obama's reply as calm thunder. Trump fired back on Twitter early in the morning, typing in all caps, "Obama was disrespectful. Fake news won't tell the truth. This was a setup." But the damage was already done. Screens across America weren't showing his tweets. They were replaying Obama's calm voice again and again. History will remember who told the truth and who tried to silence it. But if the media storm was powerful, what mattered most was how ordinary Americans process a moment in classrooms, in factories, in small-town diners, and big city offices. Because that's where the real judgment was about to take shape. By sunrise, the clash at the White House wasn't just political theater. It had become part of the national conversation in coffee shops, classrooms, union halls, and community centers. People weren't only repeating Obama's words. They were dissecting them, applying them to their own lives, turning a single sentence into a mirror for the state of the country. In Cleveland, a morning radio show opened its lines to callers. The first caller, a grandmother who had lived through the civil rights era, said quietly, "I've seen presidents shout before. I've seen leaders lose their cool. But what I saw last night was a man keeping his dignity, while another man tried to strip him of it. That spoke to me more than any policy ever could." Her voice cracked with emotion, and the host let the silence hang before moving on. In Phoenix, a group of factory workers gathered around the break room TV, replaying the clip. One man shook his head and muttered, "I don't even like Obama. Never did. But Trump screaming like that, he looked weak. Obama looked like the president even though he's not." His co-worker sipped coffee and replied, "That's the thing. Being loud don't make you strong. It just makes you loud." Meanwhile, in high schools across the country, teachers found themselves fielding questions from students who had watched the confrontation on TikTok or Twitter. In a classroom in Portland, a young girl raised her hand and asked her civics teacher, "Why did the president get so angry if the other guy was just talking?" The teacher paused, smiled faintly, and said, "Because sometimes words reveal more than we want them to, and sometimes the truth makes people defensive." The moment also made its way into pulpits. In Dallas, a pastor told his congregation, "Decency is not weakness, it is strength." And last night, we were reminded of that truth. Congregants murmured their agreement, some nodding, some tearing up. Across college campuses, debates raged. In a lecture hall at the University of Michigan, students packed into a political science class, arguing over whether Obama's reply was a turning point or just another flash in the media cycle. A professor scribbled Obama's quote on the board. History will remember who told the truth and who tried to silence it, and told the students, this isn't just rhetoric. This is a case study in leadership under pressure. But not everyone was celebrating. In rural Iowa, a group of farmers gathered at a diner counter, many loyal Trump supporters, and fumed about the coverage. "The media is making Obama look like a saint," one man grumbled. "They're just looking for ways to tear Trump down." At the same time, grassroots movements sprang up using the confrontation as momentum. A group of college students launched a campaign called Dignity First, holding rallies where they played the clip on giant screens. Civil rights leaders tied Obama's words to larger struggles for justice, reminding people that calm courage often wins against loud intimidation. Trump's team tried new tactics, even releasing edited video clips cutting Obama's remarks short to make them sound harsher. But fact-checkers debunked them instantly, and the unedited footage spread faster than anything the White House could release. Even international leaders weighed in. A German chancellor spokesperson told reporters, "We admire President Obama's composure. It is a reminder that dignity speaks louder than anger." Meanwhile, a Russian state outlet framed it differently, saying the clash revealed division and chaos at the heart of America. Back home, families argued over dinner tables, offices debated over coffee machines, and pastors quoted Obama's line in Sunday sermons. The narrative battle wasn't confined to elites. It was everywhere, And though Trump fought tooth and nail, every new attempt to reclaim control only seemed to deepen the impression that Obama had seized the high ground with a single sentence. But as fierce as the media and political storm had become, its real weight wasn't in headlines or polls. It was in the lasting impression on the American people and the moral lesson they were drawing from it. And that lesson would bring the story full circle. By the time a week had passed, the dust from the confrontation hadn't settled. It had hardened into something bigger. The headlines shifted. The cable news panels moved on to other crises, but the footage remained alive in people's memories. In small towns and big cities, at barbershops and grocery stores, in classrooms and union halls, the clip still came up. Obama's calm words were replayed not because they belonged to him alone, but because they felt like something larger, something people wanted to remember. In a church basement in Pittsburgh, a group of community leaders gathered for their monthly meeting. One of them, a retired steelworker, played the clip on his phone. The room fell quiet as Obama's voice rang out once again. History will remember who told the truth and who tried to silence it. When the video ended, the steelworker looked around and said, "That's not just about presidents. That's about all of us. Every argument we get into, every moment we choose anger instead of listening. It's the same lesson." Heads nodded around the table. In San Francisco, a mother sat with her teenage son, watching a replay on television. The boy asked, "Why did everyone cheer so much when he said that?" She replied, "Because people are tired of shouting. They want to see someone stand tall, without lowering themselves." Her son thought for a moment and said, "So you don't have to yell to be strong?" She smiled. "That's right. Sometimes strength whispers." Even in Washington, where cynicism runs deep, aides and staffers admitted privately that they'd been moved. A junior staffer on Capitol Hill told a friend, "I came here thinking politics was all strategy and spin. But watching how calm words beat anger, it reminded me why I wanted to serve in the first place." The clash had become more than a viral moment. It was now a story parents told their kids, teachers used in lessons, pastors wove into sermons. It wasn't just about Obama or Trump. It was about the timeless contrast between dignity and rage, patience and temper, truth and denial. Trump continued trying to reclaim the moment. He doubled down at rallies, shouting that Obama had been disrespectful. His supporters cheered. But outside those arenas, the memory of the East Room confrontation lingered differently. For millions, Trump's shouting symbolized chaos, while Obama's composure represented steadiness. And once an image sticks, it rarely fades. Obama, for his part, never added much more. He let the moment breathe. His silence afterward was part of the lesson. He didn't need to explain himself. The words had already done the work. That restraint, that refusal to pile on, only magnified the contrast. Months later, when polls asked Americans which leaders they trusted most to handle a crisis, Obama's name surged unexpectedly near the top. Even though he no longer held office, the East Room exchange was mentioned repeatedly in focus groups. One voter summed it up simply: he looked like the adult in the room. But beyond politics, the moral of that night seeped into daily life. People drew strength from it during their own conflicts. A father in Kansas told his kids during a family argument, "Remember what Obama said. History remembers the truth, not the shouting." A teacher in Oregon put the quote on her classroom wall, reminding students to use their voices wisely. The real legacy of that night wasn't about one man defeating another. It was about a reminder that power doesn't always roar, and respect isn't demanded with fists or threats. It's earned through composure, patience, and the courage to hold your ground without losing your dignity. As Americans look back, the confrontation became a kind of parable. Two men, both symbols of different eras, colliding under the same roof. One shouted. One stood steady, and the nation watching from living rooms and diners drew its own conclusion about which vision of leadership it longed for. When future generations replay the clip, they won't just see a feud. They'll see a choice between fear and calm, between noise and meaning, between pride and principle. And maybe that's the truest lesson of all. History doesn't just remember what was said. It remembers how it was said. So as the lights faded from the East Room, as the applause became memory, and as the cameras turned off, the message lingered. Strength is not in shouting. It's in standing tall when someone tries to push you down. Dignity doesn't make you weak. It makes you unforgettable. That's why Obama's reply will echo for decades. Not because it embarrassed Trump, but because it reminded America of something it had almost forgotten. Leadership is character in motion. And if there's one thing worth carrying forward from that night, it's this. When truth stands against fury, truth wins. Every time. When you strip away the politics, the party lines, the media spin, what happened in that East Room was fundamentally human. It was about how we respond when someone tries to silence us. How we handle moments when anger fills the air and everyone's watching to see what we'll do. Obama chose dignity. Trump chose rage. And America got to see in real time which choice has lasting power. That's the story of the night Obama silenced Trump. Not with volume, not with insults, not with theatrics, but with 6 simple words that will outlive both their presidencies. History will remember who told the truth. His friend pushed back gently. I get that, but you got to admit, Obama handled himself better. That's just the truth, no matter who you vote for. The first man stirred his coffee, unwilling to answer. In small-town libraries, barbershops, laundromats, everywhere people gathered, the confrontation sparked conversations. Some were heated, others thoughtful, but all carried the same undercurrent. What does leadership look like, and who embodied it that night? Even internationally, ordinary people chimed in. A Canadian truck driver interviewed on the radio said, "We got our own politics up here, but watching Obama stand his ground like that, it made me remember that real leadership doesn't need to shout." In London, cafe patrons debated the symbolism of the moment, some marveling at Obama's poise, others shaking their heads at Trump's volatility. Back in the United States, polling firms wasted no time. Overnight surveys revealed that while opinions about Trump and Obama remained polarized, the clash had shifted perception among independents. A slim majority said Obama's words represented leadership, while Trump's outburst was described as anger or loss of control. For everyday people, though, the polls didn't matter. What mattered was how it made them feel. For many, it rekindled a question that had been simmering for years. Do words still carry weight in politics? Or had shouting matches and scandals drowned out the power of a measured response? In a grocery store in Milwaukee, 2 mothers chatted in the checkout line. One said, "I want my kids to see leaders who stay calm under pressure." Last night, they saw that in Obama. That's what I'll tell them. The other mother sighed, "I just wish the president we've got now could do the same." Even late-night conversations carried the weight of the moment. In a living room in San Diego, a teenage boy told his father, "I didn't know politics could be like that. It felt like watching a movie." His father replied, "That wasn't a movie. That was real, and it showed us more about both men than any speech or ad ever could." By the end of the week, the confrontation had worked its way into sermons, debates, op-eds, school lessons, and dinner table conversations. Obama's reply wasn't just a line anymore. It had become a reference point, a shorthand for dignity in the face of rage. But inside Washington, where politics is as much about strategy as sentiment, the battle wasn't over. Trump and his allies were already plotting to reclaim the narrative, setting the stage for a bruising war of words that would push this clash even deeper into the public consciousness. In Washington, silence never lasts. By the following morning, the confrontation between Trump and Obama had become the only story that mattered. The White House communications team scrambled into action, holding emergency meetings before sunrise. Advisors argued over strategy. Should they ignore the moment, spin it as an act of disrespect from Obama, or double down on Trump's anger as strength? Trump himself made the decision. By 6 a.m., he was already on Twitter. Obama came to disrespect the presidency. Total disgrace. Fake media won't show it. He typed in all caps. Within minutes, thousands of replies flooded in. Some supportive, many mocking. Others replaying the very clip that contradicted his spin. Cable news networks divided quickly. Fox News featured panels blasting Obama for grandstanding and hijacking the event. One pundit claimed, "He came to provoke the president and he succeeded. That's not leadership, it's theater." Meanwhile, CNN and MSNBC played the clip on a loop, framing Obama's calm as statesmanship, a masterclass in composure. One analyst called it, "The country was split, but the narrative battlefield leaned heavily in Obama's favor." His words were simple, repeatable, and resonant. Trump's defense relied on shouting fake news, while Obama's reply, "History will remember who told the truth and who tried to silence it," was already etched into the public's mind. Behind the scenes, Republican strategists worried. A congressman from Florida admitted anonymously to a reporter, "We can't defend that clip. It's brutal. You can't outspin calm dignity." Still, party loyalty demanded they try. Party figures appeared on talk shows insisting Obama had been disrespectful, but the rehearsed lines sounded thin next to the raw footage. Meanwhile, Democrats wasted no time capitalizing on the moment. Fundraising emails blasted out overnight. Subject lines like "Decency is strength" and "Stand with Obama." Donations surged. Grassroots organizers shared the clip as a rallying cry. Volunteers began wearing T-shirts with Obama's quote, selling out within hours. Obama himself stayed largely silent. He didn't give interviews, didn't post on social media. That restraint only amplified his impact. The less he said, the more powerful his original words seemed. Political analysts called it the rope-a-dope of modern politics, letting your opponent exhaust himself while your single strike continues to echo. Trump, by contrast, could not stay silent. At a rally in Toledo 2 days later, he ranted for nearly 15 minutes about the White House confrontation. "He came into my house. He disrespected me, and the fake news says I'm the problem." "No way," he shouted, his supporters cheering, but clearly more subdued than usual. Clips of his rant circulated, but next to Obama's calm composure, they looked unbalanced, almost desperate. Talk radio lit up with debate. In Dallas, one caller said, "I don't like either of them, but I'll tell you what, Obama looked like a man in control. Trump looked like a man losing it." In Florida, another caller countered, "Obama planned this. He knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted to humiliate Trump on his turf." Both perspectives found audiences, but one was grounded in the undeniable reality of the footage. Late-night host fan flames. Stephen Colbert quipped, "Obama didn't just speak, he taught a seminar. Trump didn't just shout, he failed a class." Memes exploded online, contrasting images of Trump red-faced and shouting with Obama sipping water at the podium. The more Trump tried to fight back, the more the contrast deepened. In Washington, think tank scholars debated the long-term impact. A historian at Georgetown remarked, "Moments like this become shorthand in American memory. Kennedy had 'ask not.' Reagan had Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Obama may have just written his post-presidency legacy with one sentence. The narrative war wasn't just about reputation. It had real political consequences. Polls showed independents swinging more negatively toward Trump's temperament. One survey asked voters who looked more presidential during the exchange. 62% answered Obama, even though he no longer held the office. That number rattled the White House.